Hi, everyone. This is Colin Walker at Fairfield and Woods, and we're here at the blog Sea Level Law. Thank you so much for joining us. I've got with me today my good friend and colleague, Kate Stimpson. Kate is a criminal lawyer that I often contact or refer to if criminal issues arise in the workplace, and sometimes they do. So we thought it would be good to talk to you all about what happens if there's an investigation or if law enforcement brings charges against someone in the workplace. But before we do that, let me ask Kate to introduce herself to us.
Good morning. My name is Kate Stimpson. I am a criminal defense lawyer, as Colin said. I've been practicing, I guess, for about 17 years already. I started my career as a public defender in both state court and federal court. And then I have been in private practice for over a decade. I have founded my own firm with two partners a few years ago, and I represent people charged with crimes ranging from small misdemeanor crimes to homicide and kind of everything in between, including white collar investigations and financial allegations as well, and investigations. They don't always become charges. I mean,
Yeah,
the best
sure.
outcome is when they aren't.
Right. And what's the name of your firm?
It's Stimpson, which is my last name, Stimpson LaBranche Hubbard.
Okay. And Kate and I actually met each other through CrossFit. It's funny how we meet each other, but we did that for several years. And you know, as you do in CrossFit, you start chatting about what you do and what your experience is. I started my career as a criminal prosecutor over 20 years ago. Kate and I didn't know each other at that time, but we have a lot to talk about. I don't do that anymore. Now I do employment law, which is eerily similar to criminal law in some ways sometimes, but more on that later. But what I do see quite often is an employer will contact me and say, I've got an investigator calling me and they want to talk to me or they want to talk to my employee. And I'm nervous and I don't know what to do. So let's talk about that. What would you, what are your thoughts on what the boss should do if an investigator calls them up or shows up and says, I want to talk to you or I want to talk to one of your employees?
Well, I think the absolute first thing to do is to respectfully, politely say, I would like to speak with my attorney. Can I have your contact information? We'll be back in touch with you. I just, would like to talk to my attorney first, and then call Colin and explain. I guess we've probably gone through this before.
Yeah.
And explain to him what's happening. And then if it seems like a criminal defense lawyer is the right next move, I oftentimes become involved at that point. You don't know what they know. You don't know what investigation they've been doing before they've come to you. And I think oftentimes people who don't have any experience with the criminal justice system think, wait, but I've done nothing wrong. If I just talk to these people and I give them what they want, they'll go away. And that oftentimes doesn't happen.
Yeah. What's the saying? You can talk yourself into trouble. You can't talk yourself out of trouble.
Yes. So don't talk.
And the funny thing is that the real experienced criminals, they know that rule, right?
Right.
Isn't that true? They pretty much just shut up and say, I want to talk to my lawyer. And it's the people they don't have a lot of experience with this, that don't know that. And sometimes it works out, but sometimes you get yourself
because you don't know what they know.
That's right.
And they're not going to tell you what they know, but they're going to tell an attorney some of what's going on.
Yeah.
And then we, through our own investigation, can catch up to them and oftentimes figure out exactly what's, exactly what's going on. And then sometimes you do want to talk to them, but not when you go in blindly.
And not without the advice of counsel that knows what they're doing. And I want to say that's not me. I know enough to troubleshoot the situation. But 9 times out of 10, I'm going to get you to Kate pretty quick because she's the expert on this stuff. But let's talk about just a slightly different scenario. I mean, and God forbid this happens, but it will happen at some point to some of you, or God forbid it happens to you or your employees. What happens if someone actually gets arrested, taken away, and you're sitting in an interview room with, detectives that want to talk to you? What do you do then?
You do the same thing. You don't talk. And again, you're going to be wanting even more so to talk and get out of it. Once you're there, there's nothing that you should say except for, I want to talk to an attorney.
And then they have to stop, right?
They
By
do.
law.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. You have a constitutional right to remain silent. It's called, your Fifth Amendment right. And as soon as you say the magic words, I want an attorney, law enforcement is required to stop questioning. And then you do get to call. I mean, it's sometimes not immediate, but you get to call within a short period of time out of a jail if heaven forbid that's where you are.
So what happens? Okay, so now you've said, I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to my attorney. They stop. How do you actually get yourself out of jail? And sometimes I know you can if you're accused of something really awful. But what do you do? Do you call your wife? Do you call your father? Do you call you?
Yeah, you call whose ever phone number you can access. And I mean, that's whose phone number you have memorized. So memorize mine. No, but you call who you can, and then you get a criminal defense lawyer on board as soon as you can. And bond in the state of Colorado is required in every case except for first-degree murder. They have to make a special showing. So you're always going to get bond. And we've actually had really good legislative reform in Colorado on bond reduction. So bond can be posted in almost all cases.
How soon does that happen after you've been arrested?
It depends. If there's a case involving a victim, so a domestic violence or an assault that involves a victim or a sex assault or homicide, you have to stay in court longer to be advised. But if sometimes you get arrested and there's already a bond on the warrant, if it is pursuant to the Victims' Rights Act, that's why you have to stay in a bond isn't immediately put on with your case. And so then I have to go argue a bond. You can also get put in custody with a high bond and we can then argue it. It's usually within 24 hours.
Okay, so, but you may spend the night in jail, right?
Yes.
Or maybe even a couple days, right?
Yeah, depending. I mean, there's two ways to post bond. One is you just post all of it. And in that case, so long as you go to every single court date, you get 100% of the money back.
Okay.
If you don't have funds available, I mean, you can do it with a credit card. If you don't, then you need to go through a surety or a bondsman, and then they keep 10%. So let's say you have a $10,000 bond. You can, get your wife to give your credit card that has a $10,000 max, and you can get out fast. Or you can get a surety, and I, can put you in touch with the surety. They post $1,000. You never see that money again, but then you get out that way.
And if you don't show up, then Dog the Bounty Hunter comes after you, right?
Exactly.
So pretty dark stuff, but let's change the scenario a little bit. Let's say that there's a situation where an employee is investigated for a crime within the business.
Yeah.
Like a theft, or I suppose it could be an assault. It could be anything. Let's just say it's something like a theft. I mean, what does the boss do when he or she suspects that there's a theft going on in the business by employees?
They report it to law enforcement.
Okay.
And as far as like the employment ramifications that follow, I would defer to you on that. But if they don't suspect them, but if someone else suspects them, like the IRS.
Oh, okay.
And an IRS agent shows up at your workplace and wants to start asking them a bunch of questions, and you don't know what's going on, and they say they don't know what's going on, or they don't know what's going on. You can also get an attorney for them. But I think the golden rule is don't talk to law enforcement without the advice of an
even if
attorney.
you think it's maybe you're the victim of it. If the company's the victim, you still wouldn't want to talk to them?
Well, if you think that you're the victim and you put together the case and you call the police, then you would want to talk to them. I mean, I think you would want to talk to an attorney first to find out, what's going to happen with a criminal case. Do we want to go through that? What's going to happen to this person? Because the employment, I mean, they'll be terminated, and that's the side I would defer to you, but they would then be arrested. And in that instance, if you're the victim of a crime,
sure. But if the IRS agent shows up, you may not know what they're after. You probably won't.
Right. And you may have liability.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the scary part, is you don't know what the employee has said or done, or maybe not. But could there be liability back to you as an employer? It's absolutely in your interest to get an attorney for the employee.
And keeping in mind that the investigator doesn't have to tell you everything he or she knows. And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, an investigator can even lie to you.
Yes, I was going to say, in fact, the opposite. There is nothing wrong legally for law enforcement to tell you something that's absolutely false.
for instance, your employee told me that you told them to commit this tax fraud,
Correct.
right? I mean, and that's not far-fetched at all.
Not at
That's
all.
exactly the kind of thing they might say.
Not at
And
all. I
you-
mean,
You're so mad, you spill your guts and who knows where all that goes,
right. And maybe there's some kind of liability that you weren't even thinking of, but you're so mad. I mean, the questions.
Yeah.
Law enforcement is trained that a tactic that they have is to give you, accuse you of something falsely or tell you this witness said this thing in order to get a strong reaction out of you, which is then the truth. So don't fall for it. And
Yeah,
just don't come.
Another thing that the hardened criminals seem to know, right? That it's the not so hardened criminals or the innocent people that don't know that rule. And keep in mind, if something like that happens, you may never be convicted. You may never even be charged. But you still are going to hire a lawyer and go back and forth and spend a lot of money, and it's going to be stressful. It's going to be terrible. So just keep your mouth shut,
Keep
right?
your mouth shut. I mean, I have several cases going on right now where everybody kept their mouth shut. I started immediately on the case. I've done little work except for just be available. I've told law enforcement, we're not talking. If you want to talk to me about what's going on, we might change our mind. And the cases sit and sit and sit and sit versus people who talk too much, think that they're going to talk their way out of it, give a bunch of documents, and then they're charged before they call
And
me.
maybe arrested.
Yes, arrested and charged. That's not when you want to contact the attorney.
Right.
You want to contact the attorney or be in front of it as much as you can.
Right. So let's end with this. Let's say someone on this call wants to hire you.
Mhm.
And I think most of us know how that goes. You call the attorney, you sign an engagement letter, you provide a retainer. Okay. But let's think about a twist that does arise sometimes. Let's say the employer wants to hire a criminal defense attorney like Kate to defend a key employee. How does that work?
That is common and happens all the time. It's a third party agreement, and it happens with employers to employees or husbands to wives or parents to kids. And it just means that someone else is paying my legal fee. And my fee agreement is with that third party. Confidentiality and privilege is incredibly important in all cases, but particularly in these cases. So my privilege and my duty of loyalty remains with my client, but another person can be responsible for the legal fees. I can have that financial agreement with that person.
Okay.
And I just can't talk about, there's a lot that I can talk to the third party about, like procedural things or what's, when the next court date is, what's going to happen in the court date, when this other thing might happen and some other things there, but there are privilege issues that I can't, call you and tell you, well, here's what he said. And then he said this happened and then that happened. That's the kind of stuff.
So if the boss says, well, we're going to hire you, Kate, but I want to know everything that's going on in this case. And I want you to keep, the answer is going to be, hey, I'm sorry. That's just not how this works. And here's why. We've got this attorney-client privilege. It's super important. And if I tell you all that, we're waiving the privilege. But something that, like you said, the procedural stuff, but you could say, the boss could say, hey, I want to hire you to represent this key employee, but I want to be aware of the fees. I don't want this to get out of hand. And, can you tell me when you're approaching $5,000? Can you tell me when you're approaching $10,000? Can you tell me when, okay, there's a big hearing coming up and the fees are going to go through the roof if we don't, reach a plea, something like that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's absolutely what we can talk about. We can definitely talk about that.
Okay. Well, I hope this has been useful to all of you. I've referred to Kate so many times, I can't think of it. And on other times I've just called her and said, hey, this is going on. What do you think? And it's just great to have her as a colleague and a resource. So if you get into that situation, I can highly recommend her. And if you call me, I'm probably going to recommend Kate to you at that time. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you never have any of these problems, but some of you probably are sooner or later. And if you do, we're happy to help. And thanks for joining us at C-Level Law.
Yeah, thanks.